I have two questions. Firstly, I'm curious about because you're not on a limited plane and you're going at your maximum, is there any concern about safety if you're wildly gesticulating around? And the second question, you kind of touched on this when you're talking about how a lot of the ways to measure traditional ways to measure how much effort you should put in are gone, but in traditional high intensity training, one of the ways is you go till failure. And so what would you recommend as to a point to stop?
Sure.
I can touch on the failure, the idea about failure. It's a very, I've kind of blogged about this and talked about it, but what is failure, right? So studies have been done where someone can work a muscle to failure, and that muscle can be stimulated electronically and still fire at a higher rate. So the muscle is not failing. There's an internal governor within your system that's actually keeping you from hurting your dumb ass, essentially. So it shuts you down, but it's more of a central governor system that's shutting you down. So the idea of going to failure is kind of arbitrary. But if you have indicators here, now you have something real that you can work against. I guess that's the best way.
Right. And failure was a crude indicator of a certain amount of inroad. You figured that you started with a weight that is some percentage lower than what you could maximally lift, and when you could no longer lift it, your muscle had been inroaded or fatigued to that degree. And with that green range, you could do that as well. One of the ways I like to have a client do it is stay in that green range until they can't, and that's roughly the same thing. I'm not having them pull as hard as they can out of the gate. By the end, they have an enormous effort, and then they can't keep it in that green range. They're done. That's the end of the set. That's failure in the context of what failure's original intent was to be. Now back to your first question. Up to a point, the harder you pull, the tighter your form becomes. Think about doing a bicep curl with 10 pounds versus, say, something like what would be a 5-rep max for you. With that lighter weight, you can move that guy all over the place. You can wing your elbow in and out and so on. When you get heavier, the form, the path of the motion will tighten up, because mechanically, that's the most efficient portion. And then when you get to the far end, it's sort of a bell curve. Then when you get to like 1-rep max territory, it becomes total body mechanics rather than specific joint and muscle mechanics to try and move that point from A to B. And then that becomes dangerous. That's deadlifting with the body like this, because you're trying to actually shorten them. If you're like this, you've got a wide moment arm. If you go like this, the bar moves closer to your center of mass, so it becomes slightly easier. Screw up your back, but you move that point from A to B. So we don't typically see that on this machine, that if a person is coached correctly, that's not a problem, their form's good.
And you also don't find people, you don't see Granny all of a sudden firing her CNS to just recruit all these fast twitch fibers and putting herself in danger. She doesn't know how to do that. This guy does, and so, but he knows how to do it in good form. So again, it's all adaptive and relative to that person. Whereas you could, on a deadlift, which can be a problematic exercise if you don't do it right, in a gravity-based system, you could put the wrong amount of weight on the bar and get hurt doing it.
So again, the machine's not feeding you, loading you with resistance. You're having the amount of force you develop mirrored back to you, essentially.
Hey, what would you recommend for somebody who commonly gets inflamed joints after any sort of exercise?
Are you eating in a paleo fashion,
I just started doing that recently, but it's been like 2 months of eating what I think is well, and I still get inflamed joints pretty commonly.
Yeah, most of the time, you're talking about inflammation markers don't drop like a rock. Under most circumstances, the way people do it. And what I would suggest to you is that most of that's going to be dietarily driven. The fact that the strength training sets it off is just indicative of the fact that you're pretty inflamed to begin with. Here's a good metaphor, because most people, when they embark on a paleo diet, or an ancestral whole food, real food diet, don't really do this, but they remove some of the things that they're psychologically comfortable with removing, and they leave in a bunch of agents that are problematic, potentially problematic. Say you have 10 cats and you learn you are allergic to cats. Will getting rid of 9 cats stop the cat allergy from happening? No, of course not, but you're doing that with your food. You've chosen the 9 cats you don't like and kept the ones that you do that are potentially providing you with problems. You might find, and some people do, they have to remove every possible inflammatory agent. Dave could tell you a whole lot more about that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and you'll get that whole presentation tomorrow, but that's a general idea. Is like people go, oh yeah, this seems like it's the least problematic, but you know what? It might be the most problematic for you. Yeah. And then the strength training just sets it off.
I've never really been a big fan of machines, and that's just how I've always been trained. And for the pull down, it just looked, like you said, it was very static. Can this machine like incorporate like compound movements and stuff that really will hit like multiple muscle groups?
You're going to have to
stuff
define
like
your
that.
terms, because that was a compound movement.
Well, he just. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Tell me what you mean by a compound movement, because in the weight training world, any multi-joint movement, he was moving at the shoulder.
Is a compound
Is
movement.
a compound
Yeah.
movement.
Just the fact that he was sitting. I don't like any type of. If you're like sitting down, it's usually not. Even with like if you're doing an overhead press, I like to stand. Even with that, or just like a body weight like kind of burpee movement or something like that. I like doing stuff that uses full body or a lot of it. Can this like achieve that, or can it achieve that with little effort over like just a few exercises?
Well, I mean, yes and no to your question. I mean, can you do a standing overhead press? Yes, and I think we might have a video online of Keith on the Omni doing a standing overhead press. Burpee, no. I mean, and you said the word like a lot.
Yep.
You like doing that. Is that beneficial? Sorry, no. I mean, it's something you like to do. It's an outburst of your strength and what you like to do. That's not part of our core programming, so to say. We're not saying you shouldn't do it, but it's something that you like to do. Does that make sense?
I'll give you an example. I do on the industrial version of this that we have in the studio that I work out, I do chins on that, right? But I also like to do free weight chins with what I talked about, the wheels hanging between my legs, all of that, just because I like it. I like that movement. I like that as well. But I can tell you that inroading that I get on this type of stuff is 100 times better than what I can do doing that movement.
Right.
So it kind of depends on what is it that I'm trying to do today, and how is that relative to my overall goal set.
And Keith will probably admit, I mean, to a certain degree, he's addicted to certain forms of exercise.
Yeah, I like
and that's
that
not
stuff.
a bad addiction, but that's feeding another part of his, that's the performance end, if you will, and the psychological end. Yeah, people will say, well, don't you still lift real weight? Well, the answer for all of us is yes. And I'll speak for me personally. I mean, I probably dedicate the least amount of time to working out of the bunch. And most bang for my buck is here. Now, do I still go out and cycle sometimes, or bike, or run around and play with the kids? Yeah, I do. But again, it's because I like to do it.
Yeah, I mean, and ultimately, your muscles are stupid. That's where really, your muscles don't know you're doing a pull down or a chin up or whatever. They have one job, and it is to contract, and it's to do that on a very specific path. Your bicep connects onto your shoulder blade, and it connects to your radial tuberosity on your forearm. And when your brain sends a message to fire, it bends the elbow. How it goes about doing that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you like. It doesn't matter that it's on the ARX. It doesn't matter it's a chin. All that matters is that this is contracting against a sufficient resistance. So that's going back to that point. You like a lot of things. We all do different things within that. This is a tool in the box. And you're going to find that some people don't have that interest like you do. And all they're looking at is, what can I get for the least amount of time? And to have other people, I mean, we have athletes, big-time athletes, who are more like, I like doing X, Y, and Z. But I know that I do X, Y, and Z better when I include this. And that's how we incorporated with them. Powerlifters, bodybuilders, distance runners, sprint athletes. Because ultimately, if their glutes need to get stronger, a belt squat on this is going to make them stronger. Because that's what the glutes are facilitated in doing. It doesn't have to be a barbell squat. They just have to be taxed, recover stronger, do it again, repeat.
So hey, I'd love, throw on some Rage Against the Machine and knock out 5 sets of 5 chins heavily loaded. I love that. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
But if I'm looking for time efficiency and super inroad, I can do 2 pops of 3 here, 5 minutes, I'm taxed. I mean, I'm done.
Yeah.
So.
No, you'll take 3.
Yeah, that's me. Where do I find one, and how do I get it, and what does it cost, if you're willing to share that, or if not?
Yeah, I mean, again, you can go to arxfit.com, and send an inquiry in, and we'll get back to you. Again, we're in development. I'm right now looking at getting the Omni manufactured at another facility so that we can get it produced at more of a mass production rate, so that the prices come down. We know the market dictates the pricing. So right now, again, I almost want to slightly withhold the price just because we're in that pursuit of getting the price lower. If that makes sense.
Is it going to matter where I live, or what if I live what if I'm on YouTube and I live in Austria or something? Can I get it?
Yeah, I mean, we literally do have these Omnis around the world. I don't know if you connected with the guy in London that has it when you were there. But anyway, so yeah, we ship them wherever. We haven't gone down to Australia yet, although we've had some inquiries. But yeah, yep. Okay, I think we're all done then.